Hey guys, this is Rob with McDojoLife, and you're checking out Rolling with Ronin with J-Ronin.
In this unprecedented time, when so many of hip-hop's greats are dying from health issues, depression, mental illness, drug and alcohol abuse, whether they're young or middle-aged, I wanted to share my love for martial arts and a more healthy lifestyle and be the bridge between the hip-hop community and the martial arts one. Come roll with me as I journey to get healthier and learn more of the martial way. This is Rolling with Ronin. Ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? What's up? DJ J-Ronin, All Elements TV, and this is Rolling with Ronin. And we have a very special guest, Rob Ingram. I said it correctly, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. And from Jacksonville, Florida, and better known, as the guy that runs McDojoLife.
That's me. That's what I do.
So many videos have gone viral on Instagram, and the YouTube page is amazing. You do a podcast as well. You interview a lot of martial artists and YouTubers. Tell me a little bit about yourself, though. How did you first get involved in the martial arts?
Well, when I was a kid, I was getting the crap beat out of me all the time in school. I was born with a cleft palate. So I have scars on my face because of all the surgeries I had to go through for reconstruction and things like that.
Right.
And so I got picked on, I got teased. And then eventually it kind of came to a head in middle school where I got jumped by a group of kids. They just beat the crap out of me for about like 6 minutes. It was more like 5, to be honest, because from the time the bell rang, they started to the time the second bell rang, which is a 5-minute gap in between. So they beat the crap out of me. 2 teachers stood there and watched the whole thing and did nothing about it. They just kind of watched it happen. And so a friend of mine who had been training in martial arts as a kid for a long time, he was late to that class, which is the MO of my friend. I still am friends with him today, and he's still always late to shit. But he wind up like seeing me and walking over and helping me up and walking me to the nurse's office. And as we were walking to the nurse's office, he handed me a card and he said, "You need this." And the card was for a free trial class at a karate school. And so I started right after that. And now April will mark 25 years in the industry, which is pretty cool.
What kind of karate was it?
So it's a freestyle karate. And so over the years, now I'm a 3rd degree black belt in karate, a 3rd degree black belt in something called this is Judo, which is a weapon system nobody's really heard of. It basically just means I'm good at nunchucks, which is a fairly useless skill most of the time. I'm a purple belt in Brazilian.
You can put them in your pants and pull them out if you need to. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the state. A purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 6-0 amateur boxer, 4-2 amateur kickboxer. Right. I was on an international kickboxing team for 2 years. What else? Been doing martial arts business consulting a lot for like the last decade, which is like my favorite thing to do in the industry. And I ran a school for 4 years until it got bought out. And so now McDojoLife is all I do full time.
Wow. Okay. And the karate you were doing was more like Shotokan, like are you doing like the Heians?
It was more like kickboxing. It was more like a Joe Louis style kickboxing. Like if you ever go back in the day and look at like Joe Louis, like he was doing karate, but it was more like a kickboxing style, like Benny the Jet and stuff. So
right. Yeah, I did some of that when I was a kid as well. I enjoyed it.
Cool, man. I like
Joe Louis and Bill Superfoot Wallace and stuff like that.
Yeah, I actually have a really cool story about that. I don't know what I can get away with saying on here though.
I'm doing YouTube ads. Just don't curse too much. That's all. Other than that, go ahead.
Well, I can't tell that story then.
That's all right.
I got it. But it's the first time I ever met Bill Wallace, I already knew that he was kind of a legend.
Right.
I'd seen his stuff. I loved the way that he fought. He actually was one of the guys that brought that style of fighting sideways that a lot of people do now in sport karate. He kind of was the guy who started that. And he said it was because like he had an injured leg. And so he always put it behind him so he wouldn't have to worry about it getting hit, which I thought was smart. But he developed his old Superfoot style based off of that fighting sideways thing. Right. And so I saw him kickbox. It was very unique to me at the time. And I think I was about 15 or 16 years old when I first met him. My instructor and him were both doing a seminar at the same event. So this event had all these different instructors and they were all having their own seminars. And that one was one that I was going to. I was like, man, I'm going to go to this Bill Wallace seminar. I'm going to learn. And I did learn a lot. I still have learned a lot from Bill Wallace over the years. mostly about how to stretch and not jack my hips up. But when I met him for the first time, I was super gothic in school. So I used to like wear all white, or I wear all black, or I wear all red.
Right.
Like I was just like very much a cartoon character of myself. And I
We
didn't
like
realize
Tyler Manson and stuff like
yeah,
that, or
yeah, I
like
didn't,
old school guy. Yeah, I'm a
yeah,
DJ,
I
so
mean,
I know.
it was a little bit more like all of that, all the above. I think my
Okay.
thing was I was just trying to like fit in with the kids who never fit in because
Right.
like they accept you. And
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
was just
I
like,
was into punk rock. I had a mohawk at one time.
I got you.
Yeah,
So like, yeah, so it was just how I dressed, right? That was how I chose to represent myself.
right.
And I wind up wearing all that, and I had like red glasses on, like the actual tint of the glasses were red too, red hat, red shirt, everything.
At a
And
seminar.
oh yeah, at the seminar. Well, I was going to change. You know, obviously I wasn't going to wear that when I was training, but I showed up in. And
Right.
so my instructor was like, "Hey, did you want to meet Bill Wallace?" I was like, "Man, I'd love to." And so he goes, "Let me introduce you." So he walks me up to Bill Wallace and he goes, "Hey man, and this is Bill Wallace. This is my student Rob. He wanted to meet you. I wanted to introduce you." And him and Lee, my instructor, were really close friends. They were homies.
Right.
And Bill Wallace puts his hand on my shoulder and he starts walking me away from the crowd. And he's like, "Talk, he's just shooting the breeze, right?" And he looked at me and he goes, "Can I ask you a question?" And he waited till we were like way away from like everybody, right?
Yeah.
And you're probably gonna have to beat this part out for the YouTube, but just like timestamp it. But as he walked me away, he goes, "Why are you dressed like that?" And I go, "Like what?" He goes, like that." He goes, "Could you do me a favor?" I go, "Sure. What can I do?" I thought he was gonna give me like this great advice. He goes, "Stop dressing like that. You look like a." And that's the only thing he said to me. And he walked away. That's all he said. And then I was like, well, that's weird. Like, this is a mentor, like figure, like somebody I'm like looking up to.
You know, he's old school.
Oh, yeah.
My uncle who did martial arts in the 70s was like, "Oh, stop being a fairy." You know, he
Yeah.
like,
And so I don't hold it against him. He's just one of those people that always like spoke his mind no matter what was going on in his mind. And I don't think he was like homophobic or anything. I think he was just doing one of those like barbershop insults, like, you know, jab you a little bit, like buddy jab. But at the end of the day, it was like my first real interaction with him ever. Those are the first words he ever really said to me.
He did he did remind me of a story. Did he get you to stop dressing like that? Did you change how you dress?
Hell no. I dress how I please. I don't care what he has to say. But eventually, obviously, I don't dress like that anymore. But that was because I was a kid in high school.
Right.
You know, things change. You people change. I change. When it came down to it, there's just like that. You mentioned Bill Wallace, and it really just stood out to me because I always think about that story anytime I hear his name.
I got to tell you a funny thing I did at a seminar some years back. Before I met my wife, I was single, and I had like a little pimple over here, just a pimple.
I got you.
And there's a couple of high ranking like grandmasters, professors, and one of the grandmasters like, "Ronin, what's up with this thing in your mouth?" And there's a bunch of grandmasters all hanging out, and you know they grew up together. They're all like in their 60s, 70s. And I go, "Well, grandmaster, I got to stop kissing these hoes in the mouth." And he's like, "What? Did you hear what this young brother said?" And they're all laughing, and you know they're more street, but they're still martial artists. But
for sure,
yeah, I just had a flashback to that. It just the crazy things that are said at seminars, you know.
Well, people are just people. You know, like a martial arts,
Yeah.
martial artists are still people. And we want to put people on these pedestals, which is kind of where I come in with my job, is I think too many people put people on pedestals before getting to know them.
Right.
They see the person as a sensei or a professor or a coach in any martial art that they do, Sifu, and then they automatically put them on this pedestal before that person's actually had the opportunity to earn that respect. And I do believe respect is earned. I think that you can give respect, but I don't think you should give it blindly. And I think in order to respect somebody, that you really should respect them. I don't think that you should fake the funk in order to make their ego feel better. And that's what happens a lot of times. And we create our own monsters when we do that. We create sometimes the cult because of how we feel about somebody, even if those feelings aren't reflecting reality. You know, some people are just people, they're going to make mistakes. And at the end of the day, how I look at martial arts as I've gotten older is it's much simpler than people want to make it. It is a service that I am paying for. That is it. I hold the instructors to the same standard I hold absolutely anybody who's providing me a service of any kind. My barber, my plumber, all of them get equal respect from me. I don't care what it is your job is. Your job just happens to be you're good at hurting people. And in the day-to-day of everything else, that usually is the lowest on the bar for personal interactions with other people. We don't go, yeah, those 5 people in jail, super respect those dudes, man. You know, they could beat up anybody. Right. No one does that. Like, but because this person does that for a living, we give them some type of holier than thou title and respect them beyond belief because they have this ability to hurt people.
Right.
I just don't think that that's right.
And not every great fighter in martial arts is a great teacher, can run a school. Do they have business sense? You know, a lot of some well-known martial artists I've met over the years, they reminded me of some of the more eccentric rappers that I've worked with. Sometimes they're great at beating people up, but everything else, you know.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's you put it in a very interesting way that you know, you're good at your job, but you know, do you know, it doesn't make you the all-wise, all-knowing, you know, you're not Master Yoda.
Exactly. People, I think, want their instructor to be this end-all be-all because of how it's been portrayed in pop culture. You know, you look at like a Pai Mei or the you know, the old school story of the master on
Pai Mei is kind of evil.
Yeah, but like, you know, people like that's another thing. Like, if you met Pai Mei in real life, you'd be like, that guy's a douche. Like, I'm never going to go train with that guy. Why? Because he's whacking me with sticks and he's like locking me in cold areas and not giving me real food to eat and breaking my hands. Like, no, you get a lawsuit, Pai Mei. That's how that would go down. Like, you've never trained with that dude. But people want that to be a reality. They want that fantasy to be a real thing. And it's really just not. That's a great story. And maybe like the old school culture of Japan, maybe there were some very gruff, very hard-nosed masters who were like that. But 9 times out of 10, most of the best coaches I've seen or instructors I've ever seen were some of the nicest people in the world. The training was as hard as you wanted it to be, and you were only going to get as good as you put in the work. They would put in the time and the effort with you, but you had to want to do it. You have to want to fight. You have to want to train. You have to want to diet. You have to want to run. You have to want to do all of those things.
Right.
If you don't want to do that, that's okay. That's how most coaches really are. That's okay. Like, I get that.
More dieting and running. I'll admit.
Yeah. But it's like you want to do it for your own reasons. Okay, do it for your reasons, and that coach will be there no matter what your reasons are to help you get from point A to point B. But expecting the coach to do all of the work and expecting them to be your psychologist and your mentor and your doctor and your dietitian and your martial arts instructor and your striking coach and your jiu-jitsu coach, and wanting them to be all of these things all at once, one, you're setting an unrealistic expectation for that coach that they will never meet. But 2, that's pretty dumb on your part. Like, I wouldn't go to my dentist and be like, yo, dude, I need this life advice. Like, no, what I need you to do is do your job, fix the teeth, right? But in martial arts, it's weird. People want that from their instructor. They just think that they can do these magical things they can't do.
I've met some interesting teachers who actually are pretty good at mentoring people and are fairly wise, but I've also met ones who, no matter how old they are, they're still just kind of old school goons. Like, whoa.
Yeah. Like I said, people are just people, man. Some people are going to be good at that stuff. Some people aren't. We shouldn't just expect it because of their title.
Right. I got into a debate at a dojo recently. What do you think of martial art schools that don't spar or roll at all and then claim to be self-defense oriented?
Well, Detroit Dust is one of those. So like a lot of people look at Dale Brown from Detroit Dust, who's like a hot topic sometimes and comes up. They don't spar. If you ever look at his videos, this dude's got a headset in that looks like it's from 1994, like it should be attached to a beeper. And then he's got like an iPad on his wrists that's supposed to be a watch, I guess. It's like nobody takes that man seriously because people who train know the difference. And we know that if you're on the mat, that crap comes off because you're going to be getting physical with somebody. You know, like you can't have rings on, you can't have long fingernails, you can't, you know, have all this equipment attached to you when you train.
My fingernails.
Yeah, man, like that's That's ridiculous. And so he adamantly speaks out against sparring. And it's like, that's nonsense. I think that it's okay to train at a facility that doesn't spar if that's not your goal. If your goal is to, like, for instance, cardio kickboxing.
Right.
If somebody goes to a cardio kickboxing facility and they just want to work out and they want to hang out and that's the environment that they want to do it in, cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But if they go there and then the cardio kickboxing instructor is trying to lie to them, telling them it's self-defense, that's not cool, because that's not what you're really doing. There's a lot more to self-defense than just hitting a bag. There's a lot more to self-defense than just hitting mitts. You have to spar to kind of understand what it's like to be in a situation of duress. You need to understand what it's like to have an adrenaline dump. You need to know what it's like to fight other body types and styles, because not everybody's the same. And it's kind of important that you get that in if you're going to learn real self-defense and understand real self-defense. It's kind of like if I said, let's go play basketball, but I took away teams and then we just stood there and played horse. And I tried to lie and say that was basketball.
Right.
Like, that's not basketball.
Good analogy. Yeah.
It'll look like basketball. If somebody from the outside didn't know what basketball was, and I told them that this was basketball, maybe I could fool people. But people who really play basketball will be like, no, man, it's not the same. Like, you're playing horse.
Now, if you have respect for forms and, you're getting exercise and you're there more to, you're a martial arts nerd and you want to know all the forms in the world and you want to preserve this ancient style that's been around, that's cool. But, if you're not sparring, it's crazy. And then I've seen people not spar and then go to tournaments. And like Mike Tyson said, I'm paraphrasing, all plans go out the window once you get punched in the face. And literally, these guys, I've seen them know a million kata and barely spar. And then when they have to do even point fighting, they get hit once and then they lose their minds.
Yeah, the interesting, you bring up kata, which is interesting. A lot of people are against it. And I think that what's interesting is kata is just punching and kicking and movements in the air that would simulate what you would do against multiple attackers or during a fight. Right. Each movement equals a technique. And that's in the business, we call that bunkai. Right. Bunkai means application for anybody who does not know. So whenever you're doing your kata, you might see somebody move their arm, but 5 different instructors might have 5 different answers for what that movement is. One might say it's a block. One might say it's an overhook. One might say that it's a grabbing of the hair and moving it from point A to point B. So it's a little funny how that works. But then the same people who will talk down about kata will shadow box with no problem. It's the same thing. The only difference is that this person over here is adding in techniques in the air that aren't necessarily striking. Some of them have to do grappling or throwing or grips. And this person over here is punching and kicking the air, simulating techniques against a human that is not there. It's the same thing. It's no difference.
Well, yeah, I think learning a combination of techniques or kata, it's good for you know body mechanics and what comes after that. Okay, I can hit there and I can shoot to there and I can do an elbow and a back kick. And just knowing, what goes where, for a newer student.
Yeah, it's just another way to practice is all it really is.
Right. So how do you, we discussed this on Instagram Live. How do you feel about martial arts schools who try to tell you what to do outside of the mat? Don't go to the seminar here. Don't fight in this tournament there.
Yeah, I think that that's a little bit more of a cult than it is a martial arts school. And I have 5 rules on my page that I stick to. And one of the rules is unsafe training practices and cult-like behavior. I think that putting your students in harm's way unnecessarily is an unsafe training practice. And that happens a lot, unfortunately, at a lot of schools. And they cover that with, this is tough. This is going to make you tough. Like, most of those people have no fucking idea what they're talking about. Like, that's all ego. They're saying this, what's going to make you tough is training and not getting hurt and making it to your next fight. Imagine how hard it's going to be if you accidentally break your arm in training and then you need to defend yourself the next day walking to the store with a broken arm. Like, that's useless training now, because all you did was hinder your student from being able to defend themselves because you hurt them in training. So you don't want to get hurt in training. You want to avoid that at all costs. You're preparing for a real fight somewhere along the line, whether it be self-defense or whether it be in a tournament, it doesn't matter. You're still training to prepare for the inevitable fight that may happen. So getting hurt is ridiculous. But the second part of that goes to your question, which is cult-like behavior. I think that if a coach suggests maybe you don't go compete at a tournament, that might not necessarily be a problem. There might be reasons behind that. There might be a specific reason for that. Like a new guy, for instance, you might just look at them and go, hey, man, you're not ready yet. I'm worried that you're going to get hurt. That actually is for the benefit.
Well, yeah, that makes sense.
But when they're trying to dictate how you live your life outside of the gym, that does not affect the gym in any way, shape, or form, that's a problem. For instance, if you go to another gym for a seminar and they're telling you you're not allowed to, they would get the finger, and then I would do it anyway, because a good coach is going to tell you the same thing. A good coach is going to say, hey, go do that seminar, have a good time. When you come back, show us some stuff that you learned, because that's going to better you. It's going to make you better. It's going to make the gym better. Any gym that's telling you you can't go train at another gym, that is specifically the ego of the instructor. 100% the ego of the instructor.
Yeah, there's a Gracie garage on my block, literally in Brooklyn. And, it was an issue, but, it's free. I'm learning more groundwork. It's good for me. I've always been a stand up and, get some locks, get some throws, but I haven't done enough groundwork. And if you haven't done enough groundwork, it's like going from 2D to 3D. Your locks don't work the same way. And, it's important to know.
For sure.
You're a purple belt in BJJ. So, going from karate, kickboxing to BJJ, it's a whole different world.
Yeah, I had to make that transition just like everybody else who has that same path. Like when I first met my jiu-jitsu instructor, I was just walking out of a school. I used to teach on site. So I'd go to schools, after school programs, things like that. And I teach right there at the school, which was awesome because I had no overhead. It cost me nothing to do. And I just made money off of teaching, which is great. And at this particular facility, I actually taught twice a week there. I taught like on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school program. And it was a blast. I loved it. I had a great facility there. I had my own room. We had our own mats. It was really fun. But as I'm leaving that school one day, I run across a guy who's walking in to pick up his kids, and he's wearing jiu-jitsu gi pants and a rash guard. And I'm walking to my car and I'm wearing a karate shirt with my logo on it, and then karate gi pants. And we just started a conversation. It's kind of hard when you pass each other and you both know you're trained to not talk. We started chit-chatting, and apparently his kids went to that school, and he was opening his own jiu-jitsu academy. Like it was only like a couple months from then. And so I was like, awesome. So I took his card, took his information, and then I wound up showing up, and we had like a long conversation about what my expectations were. I was like, look, I'm not trying to like be competition for you. I already have my own gym. I do not teach the same style. I'm not mixing curriculum, none of that stuff, just making sure I'm respectful. And then I took the class. After the class was over, he goes, hey man, you want to hold some mitts with me and work some striking stuff? So I was like, yeah, sure. So I'm holding some mitts for him. And then afterwards he's holding some mitts for me. And he goes, hey, would you like to come up on Saturday and train with our guys who were pro, like our pro fighters? And I was like really nervous because at that time I was like, this is a brand new school to me. So I don't know what the intentions were. Was the intention to beat me up and I'm the competition, and then they're going to like beat me up and then they can say like, yo, that guy sucks because we beat him up here or whatever? Or was it that they genuinely wanted my expertise in that particular area, which luckily it was the second one. Luckily it wasn't just to beat me up. But I remember going in there, and of course I had very limited grappling experience at all, but kickboxing I'd already done internationally. And out of anything that I do, I'm a pretty good kickboxer. And so we went in, we sparred, and the first round was boxing, nothing but boxing. So we're throwing hands, did great. I had no issues. Like my fear went out the window because their hands weren't that great at the time. But then
more grapplers.
Yeah, for sure. They were fantastic at jiu-jitsu, which I found out later on because every round was dedicated to like a different thing. So the first round was boxing, the second round was kickboxing, and then they were like the third round, they were like, all right, guys, let's just work takedowns. And I was like, I don't know what to do with my hands, man. And then they just yoked me up.
Fall, and you can like do like
I knew break fall, I knew basics, but I had maybe one takedown in my back pocket. Like everything else I just didn't know that range. And so they yoked me up, man. They were just dropping me left and right, and they were getting all that revenge back from them kickboxing round. It was a really good experience because I think being humbled in a way that doesn't injure you is extremely healthy for your ego. it keeps you in check. It's like, yeah, you might know this, but you damn sure don't know this. So get to work on this, make yourself better in this area. And that's not just martial arts, it's anything. Once you fail at something, that's not a bad thing. Failing at something is a great thing. Failing at something lets you know what you need to get better at.
I remember having very little jiu-jitsu training, a little bit of judo, but mostly being a striker, and then going away to school and sparring with one of Renzo Gracie's students. And he was just taking me down. I'm tapping out left and right, and then we switched to MMA rules sparring. And I pretended to be a little more tired than I was. And then he went for a takedown, and I just lit him up real quick. And I got my little bit of revenge, but he had me in triangles, arm bars, Americanas, like, oh, I was just choking me out. It's a different world on the ground,
For sure.
And I think it's really important for people to learn all of that and be an all-around good fighter for self-defense.
For sure.
Let me ask you, how did you start McDojoLife, and what was the goal?
Well, the goal, luckily, has never really changed.
Right.
But how I started, it was just a conversation that I had with a student, which was really random and impactful. Funny enough, like, I didn't really see the guy that much else after this conversation, but I was teaching at a noon class. So we had noon classes at the facility I was at. And at the time, I was a striking coach. I taught a lot of the kids' classes. And I was kind of doing more like program directing as well. So signups and computer work and paperwork. And so that day I was actually there specifically because I was doing computer work. And so I'm behind the desk typing away. And then all of a sudden I get a phone call from the instructor, the owner. And he was like, hey, man, I'm sick. I'm not going to be able to make it in. Would you cover class for me? And I knew that he actually was sick because he never called out sick.
Right.
And the dude was rarely sick because I was the one that taught all the damn kids. So I was getting sick all the time. But with that said, I was like, yeah, sure. So I wound up teaching the class. And then most of the guys there either had to go right back to work or they had nothing else to do for the day. And so a lot of the guys stuck around. We were having conversation and the subject of McDojos came up. When that came up, there was a guy there and it was only his second class of martial arts ever. That was like his second day, his first official day as a student, but second class. Everybody left, and then he stood back and he waited for everyone to leave, and he pulled me off to the side and he goes, hey, man, I'm a little embarrassed. He goes, I don't know what a McDojo is. Could you kind of explain that to me? And the term's been around well before I even started training martial arts, but I gave him kind of what my interpretation of a McDojo is, which is kind of the purpose of the page. And he goes, how come nobody does anything about that? And I was like, good question. Like, there is no regulating body to the martial arts industry. There is no checks and balances. Literally anybody can open up a martial arts school with no training whatsoever, call themselves the 57th degree of their own style. And then all of a sudden they are who they are. And that just, and they can take advantage of people. And so I started researching it a lot that night and I looked into it. And the only thing that really existed at the time for that was a forum, and it was called Bullshido.
Right. I'm familiar with that. Right.
And Bullshido since then has like changed their direction from just martial arts to trying to be like bullshit of everything, which is very difficult because we don't all know everything. But I looked through it and I realized that I was like, there could be something there if it was done differently, because this is just people bitching and moaning. These were just people complaining. And I was like, but nobody's really doing anything about it. And so I started thinking, well, how would I do it? And so the next day I started McDojoLife on Facebook at the time. And I was doing these long essay formed posts about things that were issues in the industry and stuff like that. And no one read them. Like I was getting like maybe like 2 views, like 1 thumbs up. And then so I switched the platform up and I started to realize my issue is that I was saying so much in such a detailed way. It wasn't leaving any interpretation up. It wasn't leaving any room for conversations. And so I started changing it, and then it immediately started doing well. I started making it so that way I barely said anything, and I would just post the video. And then I would see people's reactions to what was said. And amazingly enough, I started getting more content that way. Like people who were defending it, I would just like look at their profile and follow their stuff up. Like, oh, this guy's a nut job too. Okay, well now I have more content, and then which I still do. So like people who go on the people who automatically start defending the stuff that I post, I often wonder why. So like I'll research them and look into their stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's because you're a nut job as well. So now thanks for the new content. But that's how I got started.
Right. And by the way, a lot of my viewers aren't martial artists, and they're more in the hip hop world. So break down a little bit about what a McDojo is. I mean, I know, but
I got you. Well, a McDojo has a lot of different definitions. The old school definition is like a belt factory, people just handing out belts or people paying too much. The problem with that old school definition is it's very subjective. Like how much something costs, if it's expensive or not, is up to the individual buying it. Like what's expensive to one person isn't expensive to somebody else. So that's subjective. How long it takes to get a belt is also kind of a ridiculous standard, because some people will look at somebody like BJ Penn, who got his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in 3 years, and praise that dude. But then they'll look at somebody who got their black belt in Taekwondo in 3 years and put that person down. Their problem isn't with the belt. Their problem is with the quality. And so quality is also subjective, which is also very difficult. So like you might be the best in the city. That doesn't mean you're the best in the state. You might be the best in the state. That doesn't mean you're the best in your country. Doesn't mean you're the best in the world. And there's always someone who's going to be better than you. Any given Sunday is a thing. And so that was also a ridiculous way of looking at it. So what I had to do to start the page is I had to figure out five. I didn't originally set out to make these the standards, but there were 5 rules that I put in place. And I think that everybody can pretty much agree with. I have never had anyone disagree with the rules, but I'm happy to discuss. But the first rule is there should be no pedophiles in the martial arts industry. It sounds like a rule that I think people would be like, what? Like if you typed in martial arts arrested, martial arts pedophile, martial arts abducted, any of that into Google, chances are good within this month, I promise you within this month, some martial arts instructor got arrested and put in jail for that.
Any good school, you separate the kids from the adults. Okay, there's kids in the locker room, wait till they get out. That's my.
You got to keep your kids safe, man. And the amount of pedophiles that is in the industry is astonishing. I posted a video on YouTube one time that's an hour and a half long of nothing but news videos of people who got arrested in the martial arts industry who were pedophiles. It's an hour and a half long. The clips are only like 30 seconds a piece to a minute.
Right.
So it's
I've heard and seen stuff on your YouTube, but I haven't heard about it really in my personal life. And I don't know of any New York martial arts teachers that have done that, but I'm sure
there are, for sure, hands down, for sure.
I mean, I've heard of like martial arts teachers being gay and dating a student who's young but still legal.
I got you. Well, there's a lot of it. Have you ever heard of a story called Dojo Pizza?
No.
So Dojo Pizza was a martial arts facility and pizzeria, which sounds ridiculous, but I'll kind of explain. The guy who opened up Dojo Pizza was originally involved in the church very heavily. The particular church that was run had shut down for whatever reason. And so he opened up this pizzeria / dojo because he was also a martial arts instructor. And what he would do is take all of these local children. I think this might have been in New York, but it might have been in Chicago. But took these kids who were impoverished, didn't have fathers, didn't have homes, didn't have food, and he would feed them for free at the pizzeria. Also, he would take these kids in and he would allow them to train martial arts for free if they were impoverished and had nowhere else to go. So in the city, people thought this dude was a saint. They thought he was doing the Lord's work. Meanwhile, what he was doing, which is very sneaky, is he was convincing the parents through a grooming process that he could provide a better life for them. And he convinced a lot of these moms to sign over the rights to him to be the legal guardian of the children. He did this, I think he had, by the time he was arrested and busted for what he did, he wound up having like 12 students living in the home who he had now had full custody of. But the big problem is that he was grooming these children into doing naked photos. He was taking advantage of them sexually, obviously. And the only reason he got caught was because the condition of the building. Some parent who actually was a paying customer went in, looked around the building, noticed there was holes in the drywall, knew that some of these kids lived on the facility. So she called someone who worked in the government and was like a building inspector. Building inspector comes in and he starts looking around, notices there are firearms just laying around in the facility where the children were at common areas. But the dude had his computer open, and there was child pornography on the computer. As the person was looking and inspecting the building, sees that, obviously calls the police, and they close it down. But that's just a story. That's one out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pedophiles in the industry, primarily because there is no regulating body.
Right. Not pedophilia, but there was another story I think that you helped break of a Chinese judo instructor who took a kid on his first day, didn't teach him how to fall, and was throwing him and sweeping him, and the other kids were throwing and sweeping him, and then he was hospitalized. I think he was in a coma,
and then eventually he did die. Yeah,
I didn't even know he died. See,
yeah, that was a sad story. But the worst part about that is that what we talked about before about putting people on pedestals who haven't earned it.
Right, he wasn't even certified, right? He wasn't even a real instructor.
No, he was a legit judo instructor.
Oh,
but
okay.
The problem was that the uncle sat there and watched the whole class. The uncle watched this child basically be murdered, because he put too much trust in the instructor. The instructor knew what he was doing, when everything instinctually should have been screaming to him that he should have stopped it. Like the fact that the kid was saying he was dizzy, the fact that the kid threw up, which was a sign of a concussion, the fact that the kid continuously said, I don't want to do this. And what I think happens is you get a lot of parents who have a lot of ego who don't check it, and they're like, you need to make the kid tough. If you think that by putting a child in danger and harming them is making them tough, you're indoctrinating them into being the opposite of tough. They are going to be the kind of person who will roll over and take abuse because you've taught them to. You've ingrained abuse into them.
Honestly, I know I'm from Brooklyn, I'm hip hop and all that, but when I heard that story, I literally cried. I love working with kids. I'm a godfather, 2 kids. Me and my wife are working on having our own kids, and in the dojo, I work with kids. I've done summer youth programs where I'm teaching kids music and also training in martial arts with them. And I love encouraging them to read. I give them comic books and stuff, and I just teaching's in my blood. My mother and my uncle were both teachers, so just hearing about it made me really upset. And like I wanted to fly to China and beat his ass.
Yeah, for sure. It was rough,
the kid died. Like so whatever happened to the guy? Did he get locked up?
I'm not exactly sure what happened after that. But I do know that the parents obviously had to pull the plug, and I do believe they were pressing charges, moving to press charges, as they should.
Yeah.
But that goes on to another rule, which we just talked about, which was cult-like behavior and unsafe training practices.
Right.
That kind of stuff can get people really hurt. And I've seen some really wicked stuff in the name of martial arts. Like in Indonesia, for instance, there's something called Tenaga Dalam. And Tenaga Dalam translates to inner power. And I've seen little children. I saw an 8-year-old slit his throat and kill himself because he believed that he could not be killed by blades because the adults had been doing this magic trick and lying to him, and he was convinced that he did have this power. Or another one that I saw over there was like kids the ages of it was like maybe 12 to 16 were laying down on their stomach in the middle of a field, and they all had martial arts uniforms on, traditional Salat uniforms. And then you can see like a crowd of people. We're talking thousands of people watching. And then the camera pans back and you can see like a ramp that you would run a truck or a car up onto. And then it pans back even more. You could see a truck. Well, the truck goes up onto the ramp and it lands on the first kid because of how high the ramp is, and it kills the kid immediately. The truck then runs over the second kid and stalls. So like the trick is the momentum supposed to keep going so that way they don't necessarily get hurt because it's not on them very long. But it stalled, and that kid took forever to actually wake up. They finally did wake him up, so I'm not sure what injuries he had, but they killed the first kid. And the problem with that kind of delusion is when you don't stand up or say anything, it just kind of spreads and it becomes accepted. And then that type of behavior is rampant in Indonesia. I mean, they believe they can move things with their mind. They believe that they can not be burned by acid, all kinds of really crazy beliefs.
Yeah, that in America, people no touch.
That kind of stuff is crazy. And what happens is when you allow that cult-like behavior to continue, it becomes more of a normal accepted thing because people don't think it's real. People don't think, oh, there's no way they really believe that. They do. they hands down believe it. I promise you that. And that's the sad part, you know?
Wow.
Third rule is lying about your belt rank or your fight record. If you lie about your belt rank and your fight record, it's usually the first conversation you have with an instructor. So if you're a student, you walk through the door, that's usually the first thing you talk about. Well, what are your qualifications? What have you done? And if they're willing to lie to your face right off the bat, chances are good they're going to lie to you about other things that are probably going to be more potentially hazardous to your health if you got lied to about, you know. The next one we just kind of talked about, which is no touch knockouts or mislabeling technique. So obviously you can't knock people out with your mind, but there's a lot of people who truly believe that. Obviously, you know, that one's an easy one, but mislabeling technique is a lot more common. And we talked about that earlier, like going to a cardio kickboxing class and they say you're learning self-defense when you're clearly learning nothing about self-defense.
Right.
That's mislabeling, and that can get people truly hurt because that gives them a false sense of security. They really think that that cardio kickboxing class is going to help them in the street. So maybe they don't let things go. Maybe when someone tries to steal that lady's purse, rather than doing the right thing, which is let him have the purse.
Sometimes you got to give it up. If you're not
fine.
Yeah.
Then they think, oh, well, I got a little cardio kickboxing. So they hit the guy. They don't realize the reality of being hit back by somebody who outweighs them by 100 pounds and their head ricochets off concrete and they die. That's a problem. And then the last one is shady business practices. So shady business practices in almost every industry. There's always going to be somebody who's going to be a little shady, who's going to take advantage of somebody financially because they can. But in martial arts, I even saw locally a guy who would strong arm people. So he'd go to their houses if they were late on payments, and he would physically threaten to hurt them if they didn't pay him right then.
Wow.
That's pretty shady. Or a little more common is that you sign up for a martial arts facility and they add on extra fees that you didn't know about. They add on extra requirements you didn't know about, and they just keep eating your bank account alive, nickel and diming you. It's different if they told you off the bat. Then that's your decision. You're an adult. You can make whatever decision you want. But if you aren't aware of those things and then all of a sudden they appear, that's shady.
Right. What do you think about paying for belt tests? I've seen some schools do that. You know, it's maybe $30 and they bring extra instructors in. But and you know, yeah, you get a belt and you get a, you know, if you pass. But I've also seen schools where they're paying $500 to get their first black belt or more.
I think that as an adult, you can make your own adult decision. If that's not something that you would want to do, don't do it. If that's something that doesn't bother you, go for it. Is that something that I necessarily suggest schools do financially? No, there's much better ways of being able to subsidize that income, because if you think about it, right, and here's a little business lesson for anybody out there who wants to run a martial arts school, you can take that cost of what that would be and just put it in the normal cost of their monthly payment. Like, let's say, for instance, their first year, you're aware, okay, well, they will have probably on average X amount of belt tests in that first year. Not saying they will, but if they on average get to usually yellow belt, blue belt within that first year, okay, then how much would I charge you for a test? I take that amount of money, I divide that up by 12, which would be 12 payments in a year. And then by the time it actually hits you, you would never know that you already paid for that belt test.
Right.
Like, and it wouldn't hurt your wallet. So rather than paying $100, I say, all right, guys, it's $105 a month. But that's the standard, and that's what everybody pays. And so now I know that that makes up for the cost of the belt testings. I don't have to charge you extra. I've already charged you for it. And if you never make it there, guess what I just got? I just got extra paid. I got paid for a belt test you're never going to do. So guess what? More money for me. Like, everyone wins.
I've seen organizations that are oftentimes run in Japan or Korea, make American schools, you know, pay huge amounts to get certified. And, you know, for individual students, oh, you get your first dan, it's 500, 800. And it's.
Yeah, I think that if that's not something that you would want to do, don't. There's plenty of other organizations that won't make you. But if that's something that bothers you, don't do it. But if it's something that doesn't bother you, who cares? Like, again, that's an individual's choice. And it's an individual business owner's decision on what they are and will not charge for whatever goods or services they're providing. So I don't see that as a problem, but I think that if an individual has a problem with anything that a school does, you have the right as an adult to just not be there. So I don't see it as much of a problem, because that's more of a choice of free will.
Right. By the way, I wanted to shout out the shirt that I'm wearing. I got it from Grandmaster Abdul Aziz. It's a Master Musa, Grandmaster Moses Powell, also known as Doc shirt. He has the YouTube show Walking with the Masters. So it's formerly known as Grandmaster Anthony Muhammad. Are you familiar at all with Grandmaster Moses Powell? Snooker Jiu-jitsu?
I've heard of him before, but I'm not super familiar with his work.
Yeah, it's very, he started in New York, and he grew out from there. He studied under Professor Florendo Vestacion.
Okay.
So it's like Japanese jiu-jitsu, little karate, kung fu, arnis, but in the 50s in New York and in the hood. So it's kind of,
I got you.
Yeah, it was very influential in New York martial arts.
That's cool.
And it spread out around the world and whatnot.
For sure.
Yeah. But I just wanted to shout them out because I got the shirt,
I got you, of course, man. I get it.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I'm wearing my Tupac shirt today. So.
Oh, nice. There you go. So that makes. You watch that show Atlanta, by the way, speaking of Tupac?
I don't. Like, what's really crazy is I work on McDojoLife like 12 to 15 hours a day, as ridiculous as that sounds.
No, it's a brand. It's a full time with overtime. It's your brand.
Yeah, for sure. And I wish I got overtime pay. I just get paid the same.
You get what you put in,
exactly.
as you build your brand, right?
Yeah, and so like I try to make sure I set myself some rules for how I wanted to do this, and some of those rules are time consuming, but they're so worth it. Like I said, I'd answer every direct message I ever get, and I still do. I'll answer any direct message I ever get. It takes me a while, but I get to them.
Yeah, you have almost 500,000 followers on Instagram, so that's.
Yeah, just Instagram, not including the 311,000 followers I have on TikTok, or the 67,000 followers I have on YouTube, or So I get messages all the time. Yeah, about 7,000 there, but I had to start over because I got kicked off, so I had to start completely over, which sucked. But now, I try to answer all of those messages to Twitter,
Right.
So I make the attempt because I think that it's important, because I don't think I'm that important. I don't think, somebody who literally likes what I do thought enough of me to want to write me directly, to speak to me, and they're supporting what I do for a living. The least I can do is answer that message. That's the least I can do.
I mean, I really appreciate you. You're so humble. You're giving information. You're helping people. There's a lot of people who are in McDojos and martial arts cults, and they're being misled. They're not learning real self-defense, and sometimes they're putting their children in dangerous situations. So you're saving lives. You're doing great work, and then you're so accessible. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, what if I didn't have any following? You might still be here doing this interview.
I absolutely would. I've been that's another rule that I gave myself. I said I'd be on anybody's show, whoever asked. And I've been on shows where they just didn't like me, for sure. They wanted me on there because they wanted to go after me. And I don't have a problem with that. I'm a man of conviction. Like, if I say something, I will stand behind what I said, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it to someone's face. Like, if I'm saying it because that's what I believe. And I think that there's a lot of people nowadays who I'll go back to ego, but they have an unhealthy ego. So they think that once they hit like 50,000 followers, like they don't have to answer their followers, because I don't have time for that. Like, what do you have time for then? Like, if they're not that important to you, like eventually, if your followers aren't that important to you, eventually you won't be important to them. Like, how many times have you been to somebody's house party or something, and like maybe they ignore you? You're never going back to that house party. Like, if you went and you only know one guy, and that one guy pretends they don't know you, well, guess what? I'm not going to come hang out with you anymore. Like, it's not hard to understand. And then there's been so many times I've been the first guest of people's podcasts, and I was like the only guest they ever did. Like, they tried it, and then like they just they did the podcast, and then life happened. And
I'm building this Rolling the Ronin brand, but I have a bigger brand that it's going places. I have a couple of other interviews I need to put out. I do want to tell you, I watch your material a lot. And, I've seen like hard belt tests where like like I've been in hard tests, like with the Kumite Ryu, Sanukas Ryu stuff, and also like a Kyokushin test where it's like 4 hours and they're sparring for 2.5 hours of that. And grown men and women are damn near crying in pain and going through a gauntlet after to get their belt. And like, it's hard tests. And I visited a friend of mine's school. I'm not going to say what the school was, but they had a 1 hour test where people were getting the equivalent of a brown belt in 1 hour. And we did a lot of like Kihon basics, and then a lot of kata. And then they sparred for like maybe 3 minutes, the lightest sparring ever. And then they got a belt, like a high ranking belt. Like, it's not like a first dan, second dan, but it's right underneath that. And it's like, so in my mind, I thought of you while I'm watching this. In my brain was McDojo alert, McDojo alert. I'm like, well, oh my God, what is this?
Everybody does their belt testings a little bit differently. I have to say, probably my favorite that I've seen is how most Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools handle theirs. Now, there are some Jiu-Jitsu schools that actually have a formal testing where you have to go through each technique and you have to let them know the name in English and in Japanese and in Portuguese or whatever. Like every school is a little different. But most Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools, your test is going to class every day consistently. That is your test. If you're not there, you ain't going to get it. Like if you are there and you're putting in the time, the work, and the effort, it'll show. And then eventually one day, if the class is over, somebody will say, here's a stripe. Just like, that's it. Like
I've seen that. And then I've seen people have to test for stripes and have to test for every little thing. And it's just a lot of pressure. And then sometimes if you see improvement over the weeks, over the months, it's.
Yeah, my instructor gave me a really good piece of advice, or my jiu-jitsu instructor anyway.
Right.
He gave me a good piece of advice when I received I think it was my first stripe on my purple belt. I received that, and then I was visibly upset because I didn't feel like I had earned it. And I was like, okay, I walked up, I accepted it, obviously I'm still going to, but like I walked up, I accepted it. And then he like pulled me to the side. And he goes, what's wrong? I was like, I don't know, man. I just don't feel like I really earned it. And he goes, well, could you beat you up? And by the way, I'm being very polite with the usage of my language right now, because that's not exactly how it went. But he goes, could you beat you up? And I go, what do you mean? He goes, if you met the person who walked through that door on the first day, if you can go back in time, who you are now, and met that person, could you beat that person up? And I was like, yeah, of course I could beat that person up. He goes, then you earned it. That's all that matters. We always try to make these belt standards as a way to put ourselves up on a wall against other people. It's not about other people. There are going to be people who are better than you. There are going to be people who are worse than you. There are going to be world champion black belts. There are going to be black belts who are terrible. That's just life. So stop using that as a standard. Use you as a standard. Are you better than you were the day before, the month before, the year before? And if the answer is yes, then you've earned it. That's the point.
Yeah, you're your competition.
Exactly. Every day.
Right. And people discuss time, training, how many weeks, how many months. But there's people who come in 1 day a week, 2 days a week. Maybe they're doing an hour class each day. And then, there's people who do 2.5 hour classes 3 days a week. And when I was younger, I didn't have to work and I was still a kid. In high school, I could train for 6 hours, multiple days a week, and just how, be a beast, that's an important thing, is how much time you're putting in during each month, each year. If you're going 1 day a week, you can't expect to improve that much unless you're training really hard at home.
Also, or depending on what your goal is, like everybody's goals are different. Some people don't want to get that much better, if that makes sense. Some people just want to get out of their house. Like, what if a child's going through an issue at home, and the only escape they have is school, or the only escape they have is an extracurricular? Like, how many?
I've seen that a lot. Yeah, I've had kids that I mentor where, especially during COVID, their parents don't let them out the house unless, they're at school or I'm bringing them to the dojo, and that's it.
And it's a thing where I think, again, kind of going back to that we're our own competition thing, is that we're gonna, no matter what it is that we do, we'll always be judged by people. You can't help it. People judge people. It is what it is. So no matter what you do, you're going to have people who judge you. The only way you can kind of keep yourself sane in the world where the internet is a prevalent thing, where you can have people, any little thing you do or say is going to be put up to scrutiny because there's some douchebag online who has a bad day and he wants to take it out on somebody, has a bad life, and they want to tell you all about yourself. The only real way that you can get past that is you have to start setting your own goals for you.
Right.
And so if your goal is to go once a week and you actually have a tangible goal that you can achieve by doing that, go for it. You know, that's still one more day than the person who's not training at all. Or let's say your goal is you want to be a world champion. Well, if you want to be a world champion, you got to put in world champion work and world champion time. You know, so setting real, tangible, honest goals is where I think a lot of people fail. The average martial artist drops out at about a year and a half. So most people who train martial arts are going to quit within a year and a half. So what did you get out of it?
I've seen that a lot over the years, definitely.
Yeah, blue belts in jiu-jitsu or any other art, you know, right around that time they dip. So what did you get out of it? And if you didn't set yourself a tangible goal, you wasted a lot of time and money for no real reason, you know. But if you walk in and you say, all right, my goal is to continue to do this consistently 2 times a week for a year, and you make it to the year, guess what? That's an attainable goal. That's something you can say, I have marked. Let's say your goal was to get in better shape. Well, better shape is not a tangible goal. But what you can say is, I want to be at this weight. I want to be at this. I want to be able to run a mile. You want to be able to measure something. And if you don't set yourself a goal in anything you do that's not measurable, you might as well just not do the thing because you're wasting time.
Right. Yeah. For me, for weight loss, I'm looking at 25-pound increments. Not lose. I want to lose. You know, I look at it like that. And you know, for training, I want to be able to do 100 push-ups straight now. I want to be able to spar nonstop for 10 minutes, not just 3, and then get exhausted. You know,
for sure. And those are tangible goals. Those are all goals that you can say, I have achieved this. I can prove it. It's achievable. You know, way too many people in martial arts don't know what their goals are. They have no clue. Not a clue.
For me, I want to get black belts and systems, but I want to keep martial arts a part of my life until I can't. So, you know, I know grandmasters who in their late 70s who are still training, who still hit like a Mack truck. And, you know, that's goals to keep it a part of my life, keep healthy, you know, and always be able to train and you know, maybe teach as I get older and
for sure.
That. You know, I love it. I try to pass it on to my god kids and kids that I mentor, but not every kid it takes to it. You know, they say they want to get a black belt and then they see how much work it is. And then they're like, you know, this is too much for me. And, you know, I've had to deal with the disappointment of, you know, you want a kid to know self-defense and flourish, but it's not for everybody, you know?
And that's okay. What if Ray Charles was Ray Charles black belt in karate instead of Ray Charles musician? Would we have heard of him? You know, what if let's say somebody like Martin Luther King decided that he didn't want to do speeches. Let's say he wanted to do karate tournaments. Would we have ever known that he existed? Like, so not everybody has the same path, and that's okay. You know, everybody has different goals. And so, you know, with a child, for instance, it might not be their path. That might not be where they're trying to go. And that's okay. Maybe they tried it. They gave it an opportunity. It was not for them, but they discovered that because they didn't like that, what would they rather be doing? Which is a question I think a lot of parents mess up, is when they ask the kid, why don't you want to go? They're not asking the right question. What would you rather be doing is the question. And so if the kid has a legitimate answer that will lead them down a path of success in something, that's okay. Right. You know, and then I really like soccer instead. Like, you know what? Let's go soccer. You know? Yeah.
I had to tell a kid that I mentor, you know, you don't have to come into dojo. Me and my wife will still be in your life. We do educational trips, go to museums, you know, we'll still take you out to eat and do different cool stuff and, you know, whatever you want to do.
You know what's funny?
Encourage other extracurricular activities.
So when I was younger, I set myself a whole bunch of goals. One of them was I wanted to be in Century Martial Arts magazine. That was like it's a product catalog.
Right. I know it. Yep.
Yeah. And so in Century, they always had these like pictures of these like really high level athletes. And it was like an honor to be in there. And, you know, they always had like a real like famous athlete on like the cover of the magazine. And to me, that was like my Nike. You know, I was like, man, I want to be in that magazine so bad. And I eventually did get in that magazine. They did a 2-page article about me. It wasn't about McDojoLife. It was about my school and the things I had to overcome as a child in order to become an instructor and all that. And it was really well written, well done. And with that particular thing, though, the reason I bring it up is because each one of those people that were in that magazine that year, they did a follow-up video with. So they actually flew a camera crew to my home at the time and filmed like a piece. They never released it. And I know why. So like when they sat me down and they started asking me questions, one of the things that they asked was, well, what would you say to somebody about joining martial arts? And they wanted everything to be about martial arts. And they got to that question about like, what would you do to encourage a child to want to continue martial arts? And I was like, well, maybe the kid doesn't want to. Like, this is the truth. Maybe the kid doesn't want to do that. And so, but they kept asking that same question. And I refused to give them an answer other than my honest answer, which was, it's okay if they don't want to do martial arts. That was just the truth to me. It still is the truth to me. I think that it is okay if they don't want to do martial arts. I'm not encouraging them to quit things. I'm not encouraging, but I am encouraging them to follow what makes them hungry to learn. What makes them excited to learn? Because that's what is going to make you great is if you love something. You'll practice it if you give a damn. And so that video never came out, but I always think about it all the time. Like, man, I kind of wish I saw that footage because like,
you know, kids pick things up and they try things and they're trying to find their way, their path. And you know, you want to be encouraging. It might not be the same path that you went on, and that's okay.
For sure. You know, all that's okay. They're not going to like the same show you do. That's okay. They might not like the same music you do. That's okay. That just makes them individuals. They're learning.
I was taking some kids to the dojo and I was playing the original 80s Transformers soundtrack. Okay, you got the touch. Like, you know, and they're like, what? You playing this old stuff, like play some trap, some drill. And I'm like, oh, no.
Funny.
Now I'm playing like cheesy 80s movie stuff that inspires me to want to train because I grew up on it as a kid.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're like, no. 2 more questions before you go. Tell me a little bit about the documentary that you're working on.
For sure. So we started crowdfunding about 3 years ago, and it was unforeseen that COVID was going to happen. So we didn't know COVID was going to happen. No one knew COVID was going to happen. So the first year was pretty much setting up how we wanted to move forward with crowdfunding. It took us roughly about 3 months to figure out how we wanted to go about crowdfunding. So the original concept to setting up the crowdfunding, setting up what our perks were going to be for crowdfunding, and then implementing that took us about 3 months. After that, we ran that for another 3 months. So total time for that was about 6 months of the year. So half the year was gone. Then we were rolling kind of into the holiday time. And so we were like, all right, well, holidays are coming up. So obviously we're not going to film during the holidays. When is the schedule available for everybody to have about 3 months off to be able to film? And so we figured that, well, we can do that about somewhere mid the next year. So we basically had to wait 6 months for our schedules to all click. And then we were ready to go. We had raised about $20,000.
Right.
So then a week or 2 weeks before we were set to film, COVID hit.
It was like March.
I think something like that. Yeah. So like COVID had hit right before we were supposed to, like literally, I was already planning a trip. I had made all this promo stuff and all this, right? So like I had already put money into it. That was my money, not film money. And all that basically just got burned up because it never happened. So we wind up waiting. We're like, all right, well, obviously this is a big deal. This is a lot bigger a deal than we've ever really seen in our lifetime. Lockdowns are happening, rules are passed, laws are getting changed. Like, yo, we gotta wait. And so we let everybody know, like, look, we're just gonna have to wait for COVID to ease up, then we can film. So I think it was like maybe 4 or 5 months in, it starts easing up and restrictions start easing up in California.
Not in New York, but until now, right?
Yeah. California things started easing up a little bit. And we were like, all right, well, we think we can film then. And then like, again, a week before I'm about to go out of town, bam, their restrictions go right back up and everything gets enforced.
Right.
It's really hard to film a martial arts movie when all the martial arts gyms are closed. So we were like, well, we can't do it yet. Like, we have to wait. So that almost ate up an entire year, just COVID by itself. So now we're working
so many schools closed down too.
So then we were 2 years in, and this was like, all right, well, there's nothing we could do. This is like an act of God. We have nothing we can do about it. All you can do is just wait. And so then I told them, I was like, look, man, let's just be honest. I was like, we need to make a decision. Either we have to give everybody their money back and we have to restart from scratch later on and try it again whenever COVID eases up, or we have to just go ahead and set a date to film. And so we went ahead and just made a decision. It took us a couple of weeks to really figure out what we wanted to do. But we figured out, we're just going to go ahead and move forward. And we did. So the beginning of last year, January, February, and March, we wound up filming.
Okay.
And so we got all of it filmed, 100%, 3 months worth of shooting. Then we are brand new at movie making. And so we're trying to figure out what's the best way to do this. All right. So then we start editing the movie as a movie. And then we realize we have so much footage. We're like, it'd be better. Let's do a documentary series. Like, we could do a really good 5-part docu-series.
Probably better that way, stretching it out.
Yeah, that's what we thought.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, we started messing with the trailer. We started editing. And then we were like, with the amount of stuff we have, we might be able to go ahead and just start pitching. And maybe somebody will buy it. And then we'll get extra resources to help us edit, to help us get additional shooting and funding. So that's kind of where we are now. And then what happened was recently that decision has started to pay off, because now we haven't edited the film, but we have the footage. And so what we've done is we actually contacted the guys over at Dick House, which is the production company that does Jackass, the show.
Right.
And they have done independent documentaries before, like The Wonderful Whites of West Virginia is a documentary that they did.
Right.
And so we were like, maybe. And so, but their Jackass movie was just hitting when we had the conversation. And so we had to wait until probably the next week. And then, but meanwhile, because we had that meeting, it opened up another door for us at a company called UTA, United Talent Agency. And it's one of the top 3 talent. Yeah, they're huge. They're one of the top 3 in the world. And so we're talking to them. And as we're having conversations with them, we realized they want to go in a different direction, and we liked it. So what they wanted is, they were like, well, what if you did it as a documentary instead of a docu-series, with the potential of having a show afterwards? Because if you do the docu-series, you're probably not going to be able to do the show, because a docu-series is basically just a show anyway.
Right.
And so we were like, okay. So now what we're doing is we're talking with them. They want to give us an additional $800,000 in budget to be able to shoot the movie we originally wanted to shoot, to fly to the places we wanted to fly, confront the people we wanted to confront. And the movie we have now isn't bad. Like, we could make a pretty good movie off of what we have. But even better if we can go to places. And we did these great experiments already on the original footage. One of the experiments, we had a fraud come in and teach a martial arts seminar. And that was hilarious, because the dude had no clue what he was talking about. All of this we backed up by speaking with doctors, speaking with acupuncturists, speaking with psychologists, speaking with world champion martial artists. And then, one guy believes that he punches you in the arm, he can give you dysentery.
I saw that clip.
This is not how dysentery works, by the way. It's not even close to how that works. Not even in the same ballpark. So but people believed him because he's running a cult. But then another thing I did for the documentary was I faked teaching martial arts nonsense to people. So I made up an entire curriculum that was nonsense that I knew would not work. And then I taught a room full of people. And then after the hour was over, because it was a 2-hour seminar, after the first hour, I let them know, hey, I know some of you guys might have to leave early. Why don't you go ahead and give a testimonial now? So that way, whenever the seminar is over, you guys can just go as time goes on. Right. They thought we were originally filming for promotional material for more seminars for me. So they didn't know. They had no clue I was lying to them. And after the first hour, I was expecting maybe some of them to be slightly skeptical, because I even did a pressure point knockout where I barely touched the guy's forehead and knocked him unconscious. And they all bought it, 100%. They were asking if he was okay.
Forehead being so hard. That's what you hit people with.
I mean, all I did was just, that's it. And he knocked right out. We obviously staged it, but they didn't know it was staged. And he sold it so good. So good. He sold it the best you could sell it, man.
It's like being in church when you get the Holy Spirit or the healing hands. Oh, it's exactly the same thing to me. Yeah.
But it was scary, man, because they all bought it. And I had only met these people for an hour. They knew nothing about me, and all the information they knew about me was a lie.
Wow.
And so they all were like, I feel so much safer. I feel like I could do so much better on street now. And like after that, I was like, I sat him down. And the most shocking part to me was after I sat him down after that first hour, I said, all right, guys, let's go ahead and have a seat and let's talk about something real fast. What if I told you that entire first hour, I lied to you about absolutely everything? And they were like, no, but it worked. It did this. And I was like, no, like it didn't. It worked because I told you to. I suggested it to you and you believed it like a magic trick. And then after I showed them like little details about what was going on, they were just blown away that they had been lied to. But at the same time, I did a real self-defense seminar after that. I talked about a lot of misconceptions in self-defense and martial arts, taught them real technique. And then they gave their testimonials again at the end. And those testimonials were so much better. They were the best things I could have ever heard because those people were grateful for the opportunity to be conned, to learn how not to be conned in the future. And so that was something that they were really appreciative of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. So the documentary is being made and you're working on it and you got this budget. Are you gonna be traveling like to Asia and all over the world?
Yeah. So the biggest one we want to get is Indonesia. And Indonesia is probably like it's like our big money shot that we really want to get because one, there's so many, anytime I post about Indonesia, like it's so culty over there that I get challenged like 50 fights every time. And of course they know that I'm all the way over here and a plane ticket to Indonesia right now is roughly about $2,500 for one person.
Right.
And so
go with a team when you go over there. Don't go. Yeah.
Oh, well, I have a film crew and all that good stuff, but that's why it's so expensive. You know, we have a film crew, they have camera equipment. We have to ship over there or fly over there. I have to feed them. I have to pay them their hourly rate. I have to put them in a hotel. We have to get a translator. Like making a movie is expensive, very quickly expensive. But once we get that budget, man, Indonesia is going to be the one I'm going to do. And then we're going to confront some of the frauds. And then hopefully I get to kick a little Indonesian fraud in the face and to get that on camera.
Just bring some people with you just in case who could get down, just in case.
I usually stay strapped wherever I am. So
yeah, but I don't know if you could do that in Indonesia.
You can do almost anything anywhere as long as you don't get caught.
I like you, man. That's how I am. But yeah. Actually, my J-Ronin logo was done by an Indonesian guy. I was thinking about it. An Indonesian graffiti writer. It's very different out there culturally. You know, it's very, very, very Muslim as well.
Yeah, I've been studying them for a really long time, and it's kind of interesting all the stuff that's out there and all the weird religious beliefs and things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that what I can do is by shining a light on that particular culture, I think it'll show a lot of people what happens when this stuff goes unchecked. Right. When you allow people to manipulate the masses and when you allow people to start believing some of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. Like another thing that they believe in, which I talked about earlier with the kid who slit his throat, that particular practice over there is called Debus, Debus. And Debus is like body hardening to the point where it's unrealistic. Like they'll take drills and drill into their head and like, look, I'm not drilled. Like that's a parlor trick. A real drill will drill through your skull. You will die. Or they'll do like things like pour acid on themselves, but it's not acid. They'll do magic tricks and try to sell it as real stuff. Like there's a really, really famous YouTuber who is just a complete and utter fraud from Indonesia. Her name's Cynthia. And I think
I've seen some of her stuff.
Yeah, she started off by like breaking rocks with her mind.
Right. And then she has some master who she trained under and he won't fight anybody, right?
He claimed that he got into a street fight with like over 500 people at one time.
Right. And he's like Musashi and Oyama put together, right? And get out of here.
Yeah, he loves himself to death. But they really do fool Indonesians, which is a shame because but now you have really good fighters. You know, like good fighters coming into 1FC MMA guys. Like realism is starting to come around over there.
Right.
And they're doing something, having a campaign against what they call public duping. And so people who are liars and frauds, and they're tired of it. They're tired of being taken advantage of.
That's good. I would love to see you get to China and find that judo instructor that killed that kid.
I mean, that's horrific. It's really tricky again, because now that we're going into filming for a second time or filming additional shoots, it's like going overseas. Before, the issue was COVID and lockdowns and travel restrictions. And now the problem is that there might be a war happening, and like It's like,
Yeah, we
all
don't
right, well,
happen with that.
yeah.
Right.
Like, y'all are killing me, man. Y'all making this the hardest time to make a movie that I'm trying to make,
Yeah.
but I'm still gonna make it. But
Right.
you know, we really hope that it goes well. We really hope that it opens a lot of people's eyes. We're really glad and thankful for the opportunity to be able to do what we're doing. And
Right.
I hope that when people see it, it opens up a lot of eyes and it makes people, I don't want it to hurt the industry. I want it to help the industry. I want people to look at their instructors like people, not like gods, not like deities, not like they're the holier than thou. They're just people and they make mistakes, and that's okay. We are really the ones creating the cult by putting them up on such a high pedestal. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be just a service. It could be something that changes your life for the better, but it can also be something that you can get taken advantage of, get hurt or killed by. So,
Right. You have time for one more question, or you got to get going?
Man, let's go.
All right. My last question was, what kind of advice do you give martial arts schools, the do's and don'ts? And I know you said you do some consultation, you know,
Sure.
not to go too deep where you're hurting your consultation business, but, you know, some basics.
Well, there's so much to cover when it comes down to running a good, successful martial arts school. It'd be like almost impossible for me to like ruin my business with like just that question. But
Right.
Couple suggestions. One, pay your employees, all of them. Every person who's on your staff should be getting paid. If you have that mentality where I can't afford to pay them, that means that you should figure out a way to be able to afford to pay them. That means that you should look at it like a business. If you're going, well, I'm going to hire Steve and he's going to teach the kids classes, and in exchange for like a free membership, you're doing it wrong. That's wrong. You are setting yourself up for failure, and you will never grow that way. Because what you've done is you pigeonholed yourself into a position financially where you go, I can't afford it. So rather than figuring out a way to financially bring in more money, you're figuring out a way to spend less money. Like, not saying that that won't help you a little, but it's going to hurt you so much in the long run. So that would be advice number one. Advice number two, set aside time for like your students who on their first day. And I'm talking like 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes even, right? You can set aside time for their first day before anybody else gets there for you and them to speak one-on-one, to get them comfortable, to get to know them, to find out more about what their goals are, more about their injuries, more about their history, more about everything about them. So that way, by the time they actually go onto the mat for their first day, they're not scared of an environment that could potentially be hazardous to them. Ease them into it, get them comfortable, you know, but those two things, if you do that, you're going to do much better for yourself.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't want to hold you up anymore. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and your time. Everybody, make sure you subscribe, like McDojoLife on every platform, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook. You know, support. You know, you're doing great work, and we know we really appreciate you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.